Hey there, tall, small, and in the walls. This is Narrans, and we're here doing the OC Ask for Kers and Parker's Wall family. Considering that a lot of the questions were kind of dual or integrated into everything all together, rather than attempt to make one for each of the characters, I figured that I would answer the questions outright, and if you had anything specific for any of the other characters, at that point you would be at liberty to ask, and I would respond. Apologies for the sound of my voice. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I digress. Let's go ahead and get into this OC Ask. One of the first questions is for Kers. How would you identify or consider your relationship with Parker now that both of you have finally met? And how would you describe your relationship with Amanda? And have you participated in any activities that Amanda and Parker do together? For Kers, it's interesting because he probably wouldn't see himself as Parker's father or a father figure. He would probably consider himself more to be like an uncle, if I'm being honest and speculative about his interactions with Parker. He probably does feel that almost paternal protection, but because Parker isn't his, he kind of is like an adult adjacent in his life, a fellow caretaker, and at the same time trying to make sure that he is like he doesn't step into that very specific role, but a very similar like male figure that Parker can look up to, someone who he can help pattern his existence kind of off of. And even though this wasn't part of the question, Ray, Hero, and Dorian would probably also consider themselves kind of like a father figure adjacent, some kind of uncle or an older male cousin for Parker to see and identify with and kind of emulate. So Kers would probably consider himself, if we had to think about it, like a close uncle, someone who would have been there for him and to help out. How would you describe his relationship with Amanda? They would probably, staying with that same familial theme, probably would identify as either like a cousin or some kind of like not quite sibling relationship, but because they would be relatively close-ish in age, he is younger a little bit. He's younger than Amanda, but not by much. As far as a specific relationship, they don't really have any kind of romantic entanglement, at least in this particular narrative. Simply because that's not how Kers would see Amanda, especially after their one interaction. It would take a lot for them to kind of bond over that. They did have discussions. They probably would have had discussions about Parker, about his training, about what she is or isn't comfortable with. Again, almost like a cousin who's like, if a father figure is out of the picture, a cousin or someone trusted to be like, okay, here's my son. I want you to, take him out and let him see the ropes, let him explore, but also keep him safe. Have they participated, or has Kers participated in any of the activities that they would do together? If anything, it would be like baking, like you'd invite him over to dinner, probably some movie nights. Kers wouldn't necessarily understand video games or reading. Not that he wouldn't necessarily enjoy it, but it's one of those things where whenever your life has been based in survival for so long, that Now that he has a little bit of luxury time, you almost have to learn how to enjoy those luxuries. And so he's still in that early phase, at least at the end of My Borrowed Son. He's still getting used to enjoying certain luxuries, like not having to sneak around all the time. Like he's still keeping his skills sharp because that's who he is, much like Soren. It's like, this is a huge part of my identity. This is a huge part of who I am. I'm not going to relinquish that anytime soon. But it's nice to have that helping hand, that little bit of reprieve when it comes to material gathering and so forth. The second question is for Kit. Have you ever thought about or considered apologizing to Parker after revealing the whole truth to him? Because ultimately that led to him having a mental breakdown and running away from home. And have you ever thought about apologizing to Amanda for essentially creating this chain of events? Kit probably would have apologized at the insistence of her family. It wouldn't be until probably a few years later where she realized the significance of her actions, because at the time, you have to think, like, this is as mature as I write some of my characters. Parker is still like 15 going on 16. He's still a kid. Which, I mean, I remember when I was 15 or 16, that elements of those things, like, I felt more adult. Like, I was in that weird transitioning phase of knowing what I know, having seen the world, having experienced different things, but also not being old enough to experience full autonomy. So Parker, especially being advanced educationally, because he was essentially a credited senior, like he was going to graduate when he was 16 from high school and immediately go into different college programs and kind of on that accelerated learning path. So as mature as I write the characters, thinking about Kit, she would have been also like 14, 15. So she would have been just barely younger than Parker, if not like the same age at the same time, with him having a birthday before her. So she probably wouldn't realize until she was probably 18. That is like, oh, like that was a horrible thing for me to do. Like, I should not have acted the way that it did. At the time, I thought that I was doing the right thing. At the time, I thought that it was the right thing to do. Because, you grow up your entire life hearing, like, oh, like, you need to protect, you need to save. Like, if, there's a borrower in distress, you need to go and save them if you can. And so her hearing all of this and then hearing her parents basically being like, no, we're not going to do anything about this right now, it was completely contradictory to everything that she had kind of grown up with. And so at the time she thought she was doing the right thing and she apologized, but it wasn't until years later where she would probably be like, no, I'm actually sorry for what I did, because that wasn't okay. And she probably would never officially have apologized to Amanda. Kers would have been brave enough to go out. He obviously was brave enough to go out and actually talk to Amanda. But when it came to the actual Wall family, Mira was the only one to actually go out and actually talk to Amanda and try to console her and be like, oh, I know that your son's missing and I want to try and help you in any way I can. So yeah, she probably would never have apologized officially to Amanda, but she probably years later would have actually felt remorse for telling Parker everything that ended up happening. I mean, like, oh yeah, no, like, I'm actually sorry that I kind of trounced on your experience, that you didn't know this huge thing, and it wasn't my place. Like, even though it needed to be done, it wasn't her place at the time. Let's see, kind of going in. Does everybody still visit Amanda? If anything, it would be Kers and Mira visiting Amanda, simply because they have had those interactions before. Reed, Dove, Finnick, Kit, they probably wouldn't have gone out, and Toulouse might have been seen like once or twice, but Amanda wouldn't have like done anything about it, just because Kers would have briefed her and been like, hey, yeah, no, like, if you see any of us around, don't interact with the others because they're still a little bit skittish. And it's only because Mira, as a mom, was feeling that guilt, that crushing of like I don't know what it's like to, have a missing child, but I know what it's like to have a borrower child, of having them go out into this dangerous world. So she probably would have sympathized with that, and also cooking, because Mira actually does really love to cook, and would probably go down and get all of her questions answered, of like trying different things, and they'd probably make things together, and then she'd bring them back to her family. So there was that. On to the next set of questions. How do you feel about human and borrower relationships, both platonic and romantic? For the Wall family, specifically Toulouse, he would probably be opposed to it, of, like, you're two entirely different kinds of people. It's not natural to kind of cross that barrier, and it's only because of these odd circumstances that Parker's grown up in that this is, like, only seeing it in practice can he probably find that acceptable. Mira, on the other hand, is probably a little bit more understanding, again, tapping into that maternal instinct of hers. Like, you see a child in need, and you want to do something right by them. You want to make sure that they're safe, that they're good. For the kids, they probably wouldn't see Finnick was actually crushing on a girl, so he probably would be a little bit more inclined to be like, oh yeah, like, there can be like some crossover, because the girl who was living there before, he thought she was pretty, and so he was kind of like leaving subtle hints at the time, which is something that Kit actually called him out for. Reed and Dove, that they're so young that they probably wouldn't completely conceptualize the differences between platonic and romantic relationships, but they probably would adhere more to like Toulouse's teaching of like, oh no, like, you're not supposed to cross over, and it's just like this is the exception, Parker's the exception. And as for Kers, he would probably be okay with platonic relationships, but like in the romantic sense, the mechanics probably just wouldn't make sense to him. How do you feel about humans calling borrowers cute? The baby Dove probably wouldn't care. Reed would probably think it's nasty. Him being the age that he is, thinking some girls have cooties. Kit would probably feel offended. And probably a little bit feisty, of like, yeah, no, just because we're little doesn't mean that we're cute. Like, we're so much more than just that. Finnick would probably blush and be like, he'd probably put on a tough face of like, that's not very manly, that's not okay for you to say, while simultaneously enjoying it especially if it was from the girl that he was kind of, the human girl who he was kind of interested in at the time. Kers would probably just feel uncomfortable to lose again, would probably think that it was a little bit unnatural, like, this, it kind of plays into the whole humans will see borrowers in a particular way and only ever treat them in a particular way because of this. And Mira would just be flattered, like, oh, like, yeah, it's, hopefully it's more than just physical appearance that you're finding attractive or cute in this particular sense. Do you think life would be better or easier with a human friend? From the perspective of the families, they're finding it, at least based on the narrative, they are finding it easier that Amanda does know, and that, like, she's more of an ally than a friend, or she's more like an acquaintance with benefits. No, she's probably working her way up to being a friend, and probably in the years to come, they probably would be considered friends. But all in all, when they say like better or easier with a human friend, they would all probably hesitate because they all know the answer is yes. Everybody knows the answer. Like, if you have help, if you have assistance, it makes life so much easier to go through whenever you have somebody who's either got your back or is willing to pitch in when times are hard. But they would be hesitant, they would be reluctant to admit that, because by admitting it, it almost has a weird surrender of autonomy with it, of like, oh yeah, like, if it almost like a perception of being weaker than another by saying that you need help. And obviously, I mean, that's not necessarily the case. Asking for help doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you're strong enough to ask for assistance, to recognize your flaws, your imperfections. But all in all, yeah, they would agree that yes, it is easier with a human who they know isn't going to do anything to harm them. And simultaneously, it would be better. But by saying that, yeah, it would make him feel weird. What was your reaction when Amanda grabbed Kers? None of them actually watched that particular encounter, even though they were watching Amanda at the time. When Kers said he was actually going to go down there and talk to him, the family actually retreated back to their home and kind of started preparing to run away, to actually, like, abandon their home. So none of the Wall family actually saw that Amanda had grabbed Kers at the time, and that wasn't something that he disclosed until Parker was back safe, at which point, yeah, no, fear spiked way through the roof. Because again, at the time, they were panicking of, like, he's gonna go reveal himself, he's gonna get caught, and then to, like, maybe save himself, or, like, we don't know what he's gonna do, but if he goes to save himself, then we're in danger. If he reveals, like, where we are and how many of us there are. So none of the Wall family actually saw what happened when Amanda grabbed Kers, and were just shocked and hesitant to interact with her for quite some time after, when Kers kind of disclosed that information of, because Amanda again apologized. She's always, like, trying to be really careful. And, like, one time, like, it just slipped, which is how they found out. Has Parker's medical training ever come in handy? Yes, it has. Which I don't want to spoil too much about that, because that will actually come into play for A Tall and Small Collection Season 3. I've talked a little bit about it on my live streams, but I have plans for a third season of that. It'll probably be the last season, at least with those particular characters, or at least just to complete the saga. I mean, it could go on forever, so I say that now and then think like, oh, I wasn't going to write a second one, but I ended up doing that also. But yes, Parker's medical training has come in handy significantly when it comes to that, like, they all got colds, like they all got sick, and so he was actually able to calculate the right amount of medicine. It wasn't one of those guessing games where it's like, oh yeah, it's about a mouthful, it's about this, it's about that. Because Parker's had medicine before, and his mom had to trial and error. Amanda had to trial and error when he was very young. Like, he wasn't sick often, but when he was, it was very scary, and she had to be very careful about what kind of medicine she gave him and watching his reaction. So Parker actually knows, in experimenting kind of on himself and through the years of like, oh yeah, if you're sick, you need to take however much of this, however much of that. So he actually has been going through all of the different medicines and recalculating and recalibrating medicine to better help borrowers. So that's an entirely new avenue, because usually it's like, oh yeah, you take, about this or about this much. But you have to remember that borrowers, generally speaking, don't have the same exposure to medications that we do. Over time, humans gain various tolerances and so forth to medicine. Just simple exposure over time will means like if you have a headache and you're used to taking one Tylenol or one acetaminophen, and then over time, like, you need to increase to 2 or 3, you go to Advil, you go to all of these other different name brand things. That in of itself it means that your body's threshold, its tolerance, is kind of going up depending on your frequency of what you take and how much you take. For borrowers, they don't have that same kind of exposure. And so that and their bodies are just built differently. They, at least in my perspective, my perception of them, they would probably heal faster, they would recover quicker. They would probably have, depending on season, they'd probably have a different metabolism than humans, just because they have to be used to going long stints of time without eating and maintaining that certain amount of energy. So there's that. He's probably also helped with some bruises and some cuts. And he's, at the time, for at least his medical training, he is currently in the development of creating borrower-friendly implements and so forth. So, like, if you need a shot, for example, you can't use a standard needle. You would almost have to use a butterfly needle. I think, what is it, a 36 plus gauge needle, something that you would use to administer oh goodness, I just lost the term for it. Insulin. There we go. Something that would be subcutaneous, very easy to administer. So he's probably in the development of creating things so it'd be like that, easy for borrowers to be able to use if he needed to give them like a shot or give blood, which that's a whole other adventure. Have any of them met any of Parker's friends, human friends? No, none of them would have, not even Kers, would have dared to speak to any of his human friends, just because that would have been a different kind of interaction. Like, they're only used to kind of hearing Amanda kind of in the background, working on perspectives and stuff like that to help disguise Parker's size. If anything, Reed and, yeah, no, it'd probably be Reed, the youngest of the Wall boys. would be really interested in meeting them just because he's a little bit more social and doesn't always see the harm, because again he's much younger, but with like the question before of like he'd probably adhere to his dad's teachings, but he's also a curious kid, so he'd probably be interested in having those discussions of like, oh yeah, I'd like to meet your friends. So none of them have ever met Parker's human friends. Do they know that there's a whole franchise about borrowers, books, TV shows, movies? Well, they do now, which doesn't necessarily ease their minds. The fact that the actual term is being used, and the fact that a lot more people know the family is still grasping, as like Kers and Finnick, Toulouse, Mira, Kit, all of them are probably still grappling with it. Even Parker is still grappling with the concept that other people are aware, other people know about this, and yet people still, like what happened to Parker, like people still treat them horribly, even with the media that is currently out there. And it makes them wonder, like, oh, like who was this person? How did they know? You know, did they get permission? Was this written in hopes that like human borrower relationships would foster and develop, that if people knew they wouldn't be inclined to harm, if people knew they would be like, oh yeah, you know, like we're more accepting of this. So all of them are still grappling with the concept that some people, there are communities of people like us who are out there. It's like, oh, you know, that would be really cool for us to interact and do, but still be extremely hesitant of like, we're not just going to go start knocking on doors being like, hey, have you heard of this series, by the way, we're real. So still very mind blown. Has your opinion of Ray and Hero changed since learning about Ashton, or not Ashton, Ashlyn, for Kers, since he just got a chance to meet Ray and Hero? His opinion probably hasn't changed, and the Wall family probably is still in the dark about learning about Ashlyn. So when it comes to opinions directly of them, Ray and Hero are probably still the same for the Wall family. And when it comes to Kers, he probably, again, much like learning about the other borrower media and GT community, probably is still stunned of like, you know, this, so other people have communities, other people have interacted and developed relationships, multifaceted relationships, not only because Maisie being their niece actually growing up exactly like Parker, of like, you know, you had this human mom essentially, and the fact that like that's more common than initially perceived is probably a lot for them to think about and take in. But because Kers is just getting a chance to know them, he probably has a hesitant but optimistic respect for them, especially since they're the ones like going out and checking on other families, making sure that everything's okay, and helping other borrowers that they come across and telling them about the community. And like, oh, like if you need a place to go and live, like there's this outdoor place where you can go, or alternatively, like there's this home that, you know, like the human is fine. So anyway, that would probably be their perspective. I don't think that Ray and Hero would ever reveal. I don't think they'd ever reveal their relationship unless they were directly asked. reveal that relationship between them and Ashlyn, again, because not everybody is as open-minded as like someone like Parker, of like, oh, like, yeah, this thing can happen, this thing does happen. Have you ever asked Amanda to get something for you from the store? The store is a whole new concept, and Mira probably would have asked more more or less along the lines of like, oh, like, do they have something like this? Do they have something like that? Like, there's no way that they have something like that. And she might have, between all of them, Mira probably would be the one to actually take a field trip, like a secret field trip with Amanda to the store. Again, because she's got that curiosity of cooking and baking. And so, in reading different recipes, it's like, oh yeah, this looks like this looks like this. After some exposure, and after, again, years of like probably gaining trust, would have been like, can you take me, and I want to see this thing. Like, it's a bucket list item. I want to go see this thing. And if anything, it would be like additional supplies of like, oh, like, if you're going there, by the way, you're almost out of X, Y, or Z. Like, you're almost out of thumbtacks. You're almost out of paper clips. By the way, if you could get a little bit of cloth, like, that's, if we could have some cloth, or if you're gonna go out, and you could buy this thing, but specific items, that would probably be one of those things where, like, some of them would feel comfortable. Mira would probably feel comfortable with it over time. Kers would probably put gentle reminders, but it's not, their relationship isn't the same as Ashlyn's relationship with Soren and Dorian and Ray and Hero and Maisie. They have an entirely different relationship, just because one has been cultivated in a time of, great stress and trial, and the other one was generated over years and years, and they're just kind of now getting into that closeness and that interaction. Did you ever join Amanda and Parker for a movie night? Yes, they have. The kids, at least the Wall family kids, wouldn't have come all the way down. They probably would have, like, kept on a bookshelf, and Kers would have been like, hey, by the way, like, don't turn around, don't do this, don't do that. And so it's obvious that it's like, oh yeah, like, they're all like on the bookshelf watching the movie with us. They're all like in the kitchen kind of waiting for everyone to try a new dish or food of some sort. Like, everybody's nearby, everybody's waiting, but they wouldn't come out and see Amanda, at least not within the first several years of them kind of learning about this interaction and how to proceed now that they all know about one another. For Kit, are you jealous of Lindsay and Maisie for being in a relationship with Parker? Yes, she would absolutely be jealous, because part of her quote-unquote disdain, whenever she is being all standoffish and stuff, like, the moment she saw Parker, she was like, oh wow, he's really cute, and he's got all of these skills. He's a terrible borrower, but, he's got all sorts of other cool things that he can do. So she probably would have been really envious, really jealous of Lindsay, of Lynn, and Maisie. Especially later, whenever Parker, like, kind of finishes out puberty and is 18, 19 years old. Like, he's still got his, like, a little bit of growth spurt going on, but he's got a good head on his shoulders. And when he goes with Ray and Hero adventuring, she probably would be begging her parents to let her go too. And that just wouldn't be the case. Like, they wouldn't be necessarily allowed to, or not necessarily allowed, but they'd be more hesitant to let her go with him, and it's because she wants to spend time with Parker, because over time that little bit of standoffishness turns into a crush. And even though she recognizes what she did was wrong, which ultimately kind of creates an almost permanent rift between her and Parker. Like, they become friends, but she, with that silent crush, she wants to go forward. She wants a little bit something more. And Parker just doesn't feel that way about her. And it isn't until later, which a little bit of a spoiler, it isn't until much later that he's like, oh no, like there is somebody who I'm interested in, and it's something I want to progress, it's something that I want to pursue. For Kers, are you still nervous around Amanda? Did you get your name from a Snickers wrapper? His mom did. Kers' mom, sure enough, did get his name from the last part of a Snickers wrapper, which was years and years and years ago. So he didn't come up with his own name, it was his parents. And from time to time, yes, he would still be nervous around Amanda just because they have had that interaction before, and also, like, he's lived out in the wilderness for longer. He's moved several times in his life. He is naturally more jumpy, and so it would take years for him to kind of calm down those instincts and be completely relaxed, like to the point where, like, almost like Soren and Ashlyn, he doesn't even flinch whenever she, moves her hand nearby, whereas Kers has had years of, like, apprehension and fear. So there are moments where, yeah, he's still nervous around Amanda, but now that Parker has been returned, they are a better unit. They're better working together, better at being close. And if anything, he would probably spend time with Amanda asking her about her experience, like growing up with a borrower for a son, and probably just have like some general questions about the world of, like, he is always curious about like airplanes and flight, and there are just some things that he would be interested in that borrowers wouldn't have that knowledge, and so he's able to use Amanda as that resource. From Mira, do you ever spend time with Amanda and Ashlyn? Have you ever asked Amanda to watch your younger kids? Mira probably would not have asked Amanda to watch the youngsters, but she probably would have approved of, like, oh, like, if you either want to go play with Parker, or if you want to go to movie night and like sit up on the cabinets and stuff, just make sure you tell Kers, or make sure that you tell Parker to keep everybody safe. But again, yeah, kind of, I've answered this almost a little bit before, where she probably does spend time with Amanda for sure. As for Ashlyn, I think it would probably be one of those brief encounters. So she probably would have just barely met Ashlyn, but she probably would spend more time with Amanda, learning about baking and cooking and all of the different kitchenwares and the different techniques. Just because that's what she's interested in, that's what she's passionate about. For the kids, do you ever play video games with Parker? Yes, actually they do. They try and make it a Saturday night thing where they get to come down to his little house, again with permission. As long as Amanda's not going to be around, as long as she doesn't come into the room. They always make sure that they set precedents for that. Yes, they go play video games. He has one of those Nintendo Switches, and is actually able, like, he has everything set up in one of the rooms where, like, it's one big screen, and he's got like the speakers, like miniature speakers all set up, and they've got those 2 remote controls, and so they sometimes do it in teams, sometimes they do it in pairs. Parker obviously is far superior just because he's had those times to actually work and do all of these things. But yeah, like getting the youngsters, Reed specifically, that's why Reed is a little bit more curious and even though he's adhering to his dad's rules, he'd probably be more interested in a platonic relationship between humans and borrowers, just because, like, they've got so much cool stuff and they're able to play games, things that aren't tic-tac-toe or like wonky chess and checkers. They probably also have other game nights too, just because they've got miniature versions of some of these other supplies. So like Uno, like they probably learn how to play Uno, they probably learn how to play cards. They probably have Jenga and some of the other funky games out there. So all in all, yes, they would probably go play video games with Parker. They'd probably go play new games with him. And that's something positive that kind of comes out of this whole thing, is that they are able to interact and learn from one another. Sadly, Dove would probably be either left out, or it would take a little while for the parents to let her go by herself. But anyway, all in all, these are some fantastic questions, and I've enjoyed answering all of them. I kind of wish that I was able to do all of the voices, at least at this particular time, and simultaneously kind of answer for each of the different characters. But anyway, I have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that your questions have been answered, and if you have any other additional questions, be sure to put those in the various comments and so forth. And stay tuned for the next OC Ask, because we'll be taking a vote on that next. So, cheers. And as always, stay awesome.